Three, two, one, ghost. Hey, everybody. Welcome to 321 Ghost. I'm your host with the Silent G, Kyle, and as always, joined by my pal Natalie. Hey, Natalie, how are you?
Doing great. How could I not be? Friday the
I know.
13th.
Happy the Friday the 13th, everybody. Okay, look, I know we said okay, sure, we may have said we're gonna take September off. Maybe we realized shortly after the fact there's a Friday the 13th in September.
Hmm.
So this is not us having poor boundaries because we're still taking this off generally. But how can we pass by September or a Friday the 13th?
And it's the first one of the year.
Can you believe it? It took
It's
so
been,
long.
it took so long. I feel like we should be on like the fourth one, like the fourth chapter.
I know. I think we were especially lucky in the first year that the first Friday the 13th that started after our podcast started was
Hmm.
October 13th. So it was like,
Yeah,
yeah. So
that was
you
a good
go
one.
go all in, going real hot from the top. And then we didn't have another one until now. And I think we have another one before the end of the year. So,
Yeah,
um,
that's good.
but as we started last Friday the 13th last year, we thought, what a fun way to spend every Friday the 13th talking about, you guessed it, a Friday the 13th movie. Everybody, go back all the way back to October last year. Check out our episode on the first Friday the 13th. And as you all can guess, today we're talking about Friday the 13th, Part 2.
Nice.
This movie is an interesting one. Now, for a number of reasons. One, of course, this is our first one with Jason.
Yeah, big
Not
deal.
not the Jason that we know and have grown to love.
It's a version of Jason.
It is a lumbering man in in a mask
Yeah.
who
He,
has a machete available to him,
hmm.
and is sometimes tricked by visions of his mother. So like you get a lot of the core things there. And
Yeah.
he wants to murder camp counselors just like his mother.
Yeah, I think his driving force and motivations are developed here of like the
Yeah.
Jason that we know, but his appearance felt still very conceptual. Like they were still figuring it out.
Yeah. Not just his appearance too, but also he's a little faster. And maybe not necessarily
Yeah.
faster, but like
He
he's
runs.
he runs in this one.
Mm-hmm.
And also he's definitely more human in this one. Like
Yes.
he's like almost like afraid of getting hurt. Whereas later on that might not be,
Mm.
I don't think anybody's really ever overmatched Jason ever.
Well, in theory, he would still be alive in this movie, and then we're
Right.
assuming that in all the rest of the sequels that he is some sort of zombie or has been reanimated.
Supernatural reanimated
Yeah.
entity situation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, just like the Halloween movies, Jason was never supposed to exist in any of the other Friday the 13th movies. The idea, just like Halloween, is that it was going to be an anthology series. Yet, just like with Halloween, they were like, no, 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 no. We need to keep milking this cow. Like we
Hmm.
need we need to see what happens to Jason. It was just such a fun reveal at the end. And I do think still very effective when Jason does jump out of that water
It's so
after Alice.
effective. Every
And
watch.
do you think you would gosh, it's just wild because I think the difference between Halloween and Friday the 13th is that you at least got Michael Myers in the first one, the
Hmm.
fully realized Michael Myers. He doesn't change
Yes.
much
He really
through,
does not.
yeah. Whereas in Friday the 13th, we would have never, not even counting, we would have never gotten the, hockey mask, you know,
Hmm.
undead Jason, right? He would never be able to visit Manhattan or space. And but then a part of me thinks like if that Friday the 13th movie was just like a standalone film on its own and there was nothing else after that, I think people would look more fondly on that first movie.
That's an interesting theory. Why? Why?
I don't know, because I think the movie works pretty well on its own, and I did think that it was an admirable twist that it was
Hmm.
Betsy Palmer and it was Mrs.
Yeah,
Voorhees who was the killer. Um,
especially then.
and with that cliffhanger of Jason popping out of the water and Alice not being sure whether or not it was real,
Hmm.
it's it just if it ended just like that as its own just kind of standalone story, I think it's really effective. Now,
Yeah.
granted, I still really love that first movie, and I still like how these movies develop, even when they
Hmm.
get, more and more schlocky. But I do think that just like Nightmare on Elm Street, just like Halloween, these movies, I think the sequels end up changing people's perspectives of the originals sometimes, or they just kind of get thrown in as just, the Friday the 13th franchise, or the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, like I think
For
sometimes you
sure.
think how goofy Freddy Krueger is, but that first one, he didn't joke about shit in
No,
that
he
first
meant
one.
business.
Right. Even the
Yeah.
second one, I think, if I remember right.
Yeah. You could say the same for Child's Play as well in the Chucky franchise.
That's true. I think that had a steep hill from the get-go to take that seriously,
Yeah.
um, because of just like the nature of it. But I hear you though. I mean, like, and that movie rightfully so. Maybe that rightfully pivoted to comedy, whereas maybe,
Hmm.
those other three franchises I mentioned maybe didn't benefit as much from it. I don't know. I mean, but of course that's all in the eyes of the beholder and such, but I did. I'd forgotten that this franchise was also originally intended to be an anthology.
I never knew that.
Could you imagine if something like Scream was the same way, where like,
Mm.
Sidney Prescott was only in the first one, it was only Ghostface in the first one, and it was just some other type of like teen murder mystery in every movie just called Scream. Imagine what that would be like.
I could get into that concept for like many of these different franchises. I mean, now that I know them for what they are, like I wouldn't replace Scream. I love the way that franchise has been going,
Mm,
but I like the concept. I just think it would be the audience would be really hard on every film because if the first one is a huge hit, if the second one doesn't like top it, which I think is a really hard thing to do. And if
mm,
it's a completely different concept, they're going to be like, why did they go in that direction? Why is this way? And there's just too many like questions. I don't think people are good at accepting anthologies as television series or as movie franchises because like if you think of like I don't know if this is a good example, but American Horror Story, a lot
mm,
of people, as the seasons went on, like I think after season three, people just started to kind of like criticize every single little thing. Well, this wasn't as good, or this actor didn't do as good of a performance as this character, as that
mm,
character. And like the comparison just starts to hurt it even more so than a franchise that's building on a story.
mm. Yeah, that's interesting to think about. I, but I guess on the flip side, I'm just like, wow, as much as I don't want to immediately speak on behalf of both of us, but I think this podcast contingent is our fans of Season of the Witch, the third Halloween movie.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just interesting to think we could have gotten way more of those. Now, was
Yeah.
Season of the Witch a fantastic film? No, not by any means. But
It's
like,
fun though.
I appreciate the swings that it takes, like
Mm-hmm.
it does something different and is completely removed from, that, Michael and Laurie and Haddonfield, and I just think of like, wow, what are just all of the I would hope that any of the interesting stories that could have been developed, hopefully, and I just think just optimistically, found their way to their own movies. Kind of like how
Yeah.
The Frighteners was originally supposed to be like another Tales from the Crypt anthology
Mm-hmm.
movie, and then ultimately it became its own thing, which is
Mm-hmm.
great. So I don't know. I'm just thinking about that. It's pretty interesting though, huh?
Yes, and without talking too much about future movies, I mean, if you're listening to this, I feel like people if you've watched one, you've probably watched them all. This, I think the very simple concept of Camp Crystal Lake and Mrs. Voorhees and Jason, it's such a like simple premise that like they actually have managed to do quite a lot with it. Like considering it's some parts, some things are repetitive for sure, but they've come up with some pretty fucking wild stuff to like keep Jason going. So I appreciate the creativity, and even though it doesn't always work, it's they're trying.
I think so too. And yet, I think this movie is probably the most carbon copy cookie cutter of the first one.
Hmm.
Like literally, the movie's 87 minutes long, and the first 6 minutes are just the first movie.
Hmm.
And then the last 15 minutes are just essentially a retread of Alice running around from cabin to cabin.
Hmm.
Now it's Ginny running from cabin to cabin, you know what I mean? And it's yeah. Hmm. But again, it's still a fun movie. It was still a really fun watch.
Hmm.
Um, Now I don't know if I would put this, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but I don't know if I would put this in like my Mount Rushmore of Friday the 13th movies,
Yeah, same.
but I wouldn't put it necessarily at the bottom either. You know, it's a mid tier.
I agree. It also, so I did look at Rotten Tomatoes because this franchise has a really like up and down. I think I shared them in our
I
in our
think I think it's more up and down and down and down and lower.
yeah, yeah. But the jump from the first movie to this one is pretty far. So we go from a 66% audience score for the first film to 33%. So it literally got slashed in half, if you
Mhm.
will. Um, so I
Sitting on
thought
that
that
one.
I yeah, I was. So that feels a little harsh, but especially because some of I think the better ones later in the franchise have way too low of scores. Um, but what really confuses me about this movie is the timeline.
Yeah.
And I've seen it so many times. So I'm hoping that either it doesn't actually make sense or you can clarify that for me.
I can clarify what the intent of the filmmakers was, but
Okay.
that still does not make sense.
Okay.
So you're getting a little bit of both.
Okay. Let's do it.
So this movie is directed by Steve Miner. Um, Steve Miner, I don't is not it's not the first time we've brought him up.
Mhm.
If you want to go all the way back to episode 3, Halloween H2O, 20 years later, he directed that. He also directed Friday the 13th Part 3. He also
Okay.
directed House,
I love
which is pretty
House.
fun, I know.
Mhm.
He also directed Warlock, which I actually haven't seen. Have you?
I haven't seen that either.
That might be a fun one. And he also
Yeah.
directed Lake Placid,
Oh. Hmm.
which, come on, oh, well, I like Lake Placid.
I don't dislike Lake Placid. I always think that I love it, and then when I watch it, I realize how bored I get when I'm watching it.
Hmm. Is it enough to offer him an Industry Legend Award?
Oh, I think with that, all those credits, yeah, even with
Yeah.
Lake Placid included.
He also directed a number of episodes of Dawson's Creek. We all love Dawson's Creek here.
Yes.
Let's see. Let me just run through this cast really quick. As far as your returning survivors, briefly returning survivor, you did have Adrian King, who's come back to
Hmm.
play Alice in that first part. You also have, did I say Betsy Russell last time? Betsy Palmer. I'm sorry, playing
But yeah.
Pam Voorhees. Um, she is back. And then you also have Walt Gorney, who's back as Ralph. Now he's
Ugh,
listed as Crazy Ralph, and I
that's what they
want to,
call him.
yes, I know, but he wasn't wrong.
He wasn't, but he does go about it in a really strange way of how he warns people. He's actually better in this one than I think the first one with just the level of crazy doing quotations, little air quotes.
So can I can I just call him Ralph for the rest of this movie?
You can.
Crazy's just a hard, it's a harsh word to use,
It's
but
his name in the movie, Kyle. You can't deny that.
that is also true. So fine, I will be on my own. Just looking out for poor Ralph. Just like he was looking out for those poor kids.
I mean, he again,
Uh-huh.
he could go about it in a better way. He's like hiding in the bushes. Last time he was at least like riding his bike around,
That's true.
like just in their face, like, hey, y'all need to get the fuck out of here. This time he's like hiding, spying.
I
What
know,
is he
right?
doing?
So, let's see. Who else do we have in this cast? You've got Amy Steele, who is our final girl in this movie, Ginny. You've got John Fury, who plays Paul. Stu Charno, who plays Ted. Ted's a weird one. Um,
He is. Or prankster.
yeah. Marta Kober is Sandra. Bill Randolph is Jeff. Jeff's also No, Jeff's okay. Jeff's the one that looks like he's the singer of AC/DC, right? So like the jeans, he's got the
He's
hat, kind of like a Newsies vibe.
yeah, is it Jeff and
Sandra,
Vicky that are the couple?
Jeff and Sandra.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Jeff and Sandra.
Tom McBride plays Mark. Lauren Marie Taylor plays Vicky. Now, do you know where else we saw Lauren Marie Taylor this year?
No.
She is the woman at the very end of In a Violent Nature.
Oh, really? The
Hmm.
older lady in the truck?
Yep.
Ah, okay.
Fun little cameo.
Yeah.
Um,
Fun.
you've got Kirsten Baker as Terry, Russell Todd as Scott. Fuck Scott.
Mm. But Russell Todd, he's back. He's from Chopping Mall
Right.
as Rick.
I liked him way better in Shopping Mall. Or at least
Oh,
I
for
like
sure.
Rick way better.
His character in this movie is might as well be Mekhi Phifer in fucking I Still Know What You Did Last Summer because all he wants is to get laid.
I know.
All that's his whole character.
And he doesn't even go about it in like a way that makes sense. I'm like, first of all, you're like nearly I mean, I know you're a teenager supposed to be, but you also look like a grown ass adult. You're like
Yeah.
walking around with like a fucking one of those little things called
The hand gesture that you're making.
the fuck are those things called where you pull the thing and you shoot the thing at
A
fucking people?
slingshot.
Yeah, that's it. Where you sling the shots at people. I'm fucking out of it tonight. Don't even worry about me. Um, so he's just being a fucking perv left and
Yeah.
right. And so you know, does anyone
He-
necessarily deserve to die? No, but does Scott? Yeah. So, and then you got Jack Marks as Deputy Winslow.
Hmm.
So, which I wrote down sheriff, but they also call him officer, but it turns out he's a deputy. So, okay, whatever.
Yeah, he's important.
So, ready to hop into this movie?
I'm ready.
Okay. So, this whole opening scene with Alice, who's living in a nice spot. I do like her
I
house apartment kind of
know.
thing. Lots of plants.
Yeah, no,
Nice.
her I that's so funny that you mentioned that because I was looking a lot in the background, like just at the set, and I was like, wow, they did a really good job of like having this feel very lived in. Like she had this cookbook on the shelf that like my grandma always had,
Hmm.
that red like plaid cookbook that like everyone had in the 80s and 90s. And yeah, I agree. Her place is very lovely.
As I was saying earlier, the first like 6, 7 minutes of this movie are just flashbacks of the first one.
Hmm.
And I guess I wonder if that was just necessary because, I'm trying to remember when home video became popular.
It was after this. Most people did not have VCRs at this time.
And then even then, like I think when VHSs were still a thing, like this shit was super expensive. It wasn't
Hmm.
until, movie rentals became a thing.
Yeah.
And so I guess I'm like, well, even if it is like a year later, you probably need that catch up of what the
Yeah.
hell happened. So that makes
Yeah, because
sense.
it's very everything that happens is very relevant. Do I think they could have summed it up in less than 6 minutes?
Mhm.
Yes. But when I also think about like the alternative, and I'm not going to shit on Star Wars here, but of having to read a whole fucking dissertation before a film, like I'm not absorbing any of that when I watch a Star Wars film. So actually seeing it like play out works better for me. But it's also because I don't really care for Star Wars. But that's that's a whole nother conversation. The point
Clearly,
is, the point is they could have summed it up probably in 3 minutes, but I think the recap was necessary at that point in time.
I think so too. It's funny you brought up Star Wars. Clearly, you don't read those opening scrolls because they don't explain
Oh,
what
they explain
happened in
what's
the last
happening
movie.
now, right? Or what's going
Yeah.
or what happened in between movies.
Well, it's just kind of just some quick context setting of like, okay, here's where we are.
Yeah.
Here's where we're caught up.
Well,
Let's
obviously
go.
I have no fucks to give
No.
for Star Wars.
Now, what it did remind me of was at least two or three of the Rocky movies did this, where they would just open with like the
Hmm.
fanfare, show you everything that goes on, and then the fight at the end of the previous movie, and then
Hmm.
that's what kind of catches you up. So I'm like, same thing, I mean, those first few movies in the 70s and 80s, you
Hmm.
probably needed that, I guess. And there's
Yeah.
probably even less time between Rocky movies than it was between Friday the 13th. So
Yeah. Yeah.
another trope that I found a couple of examples for was killing your lead protagonist in the first act of the following movie.
Yeah. That's a big one.
It is, but I was struggling to find a whole lot of examples. I mean, there are a lot,
Hmm.
but um, for some reason, I remember it happening much more in slasher movies.
Yeah.
But I think of this one, of course, where spoiler alert, Alice does get killed with an ice pick in this one, in that
Hmm.
opening scene. And Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4, The Dream Master, where the three
Hmm.
protagonists are like killed pretty or like very early on. They're the first three
Hmm.
kills of Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4, where the survivors of Part 3.
Hmm. Oh, you
Um,
have Halloween Resurrection.
Halloween Resurrection, right? With Jamie Lee Curtis. Um, you also have, if you want to skew like horror adjacent, man, I just remember how traumatizing it was as a kid watching Mortal Kombat Annihilation and Johnny Cage getting killed like right in the beginning. I'm like, it's my
That's not
boy.
cool.
What the
Yeah, that
fuck?
wasn't okay.
That was the first strike against that movie being terrible. That's when you knew you
Yeah.
were in for just trash. Is
Yeah,
that
you're like, no Johnny Cage. You took out like most of the entertainment value.
I know. Um, what was the other example I came up with? Um, Elizabeth Hurley in Austin Powers 2.
Oh shit. That's such a funny example.
She was a fembot. And then he goes,
Yeah.
Basil Exposition goes, ah, sadly, we knew all along. So just wanted to include that because that's a funny one.
It is. Yeah.
So um ultimately, yeah, and then I get worried I don't get as worried for cats when their owner is murdered because cats will just eat that body or go and figure out their own shit.
Yeah, that window was open. That cat will be fine.
Oh, well, all those windows open, the door is fucking unlocked. Like when she's taking a shower, you're like, come on, Alice. Like, did you not
Yeah.
learn anything? Especially when
We
you were not sure if Jason was an actual
yeah.
entity or not?
We literally just watched 6 minutes of all the shit you've been through. That should have you in a way better position.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And man, then of course, maybe just the older I get, I'm just like, man, I just feel bad for her parents because you could tell her parents were like, you need to come home. Like, you need to,
Yeah. They're
you,
like,
what you're doing is not healthy or safe. And she's like, I need to do my sketch doodles in my kitchen, and this is how I process.
and
And
this
uh
this is supposed to be a year later that Alice gets murdered. And then
I
5 years later is when they're at the camp.
I don't think so. My understanding was that this happens like a mere like couple months after the first movie.
Oh, you're right. They say that it's a couple months, and then it's 5 years later that they're all at camp
Yeah.
in this movie. Okay.
So it continues to make no sense why
Yeah.
Jason is an adult man
Yeah,
in the
that was
opening
my
scene.
question. This like the timeline of him being an adult man because he looks like he's about like no older than like 13 when he hops up from that water. Like that is definitely a like that looks like a boy that has not yet gone through puberty.
And that's 13 in 1980.
Hmm.
And remember, he allegedly died like what, like 10 years prior or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, so none of that makes sense.
So none of this timeline makes sense like from the
Hmm.
get-go. Um,
Yeah, they don't
wh-
give a shit.
which it still I think makes more sense why just leave it as one singular kind of story, and
Yeah.
then it would just be a fun, jokey kind of jump scare at the end, right? You don't have to think
Yeah.
about why Jason's the same age as he was when he died. Like, I don't even
Hmm.
worry about it. He's just a
Yeah.
water.
Or they didn't even need to reference time at all. Like we don't
No.
need to know when this is taking place. Like they could have just not said anything about the timeline. We just know he goes and kills Alice and then he's just living at Camp Crystal Lake killing anybody who's around. Like
Yeah,
that's fine. That's
yeah,
enough. That's all I need.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's no need for, yeah. Like, why didn't it just take the whole thing just take place 5 years later? It makes no
Yeah.
sense. So, yeah,
Yeah. I do have some questions
sure.
about this situation. So did Jason, because obviously he's coming for revenge,
Mhm.
right? Because Alice killed his mom, but he breaks his own rule of like, you know, not just killing people who come to Camp Crystal Lake, which
Right.
I think happens a couple times here. So we'll get to that. But what I really like is that he brought his mom's head with him and what I'm curious about, did he put the head in the refrigerator to preserve it and keep it fresh while he was killing Alice? And it was just a bonus that she just happened to open the fridge? Or was he going to just patiently wait until she opened that refrigerator to find his mother's head and then get her the way he did? Like, that feels very out of character for what Jason becomes, if that makes sense.
That's why I'm more inclined to think that he was just bringing his mom along for the ride and needed to refrigerate her. And then somehow he finds out 5 years later through some sort of magic that he doesn't have to do that anymore. It just leaves her like on that table in that shrine.
Yeah.
So maybe to like startle her and throw her off for a little bit, but again, I don't
Hmm.
that's not really Jason's deal. He just
Yeah.
crashes and smashes. So I think he was just bringing the head along for the ride.
Yeah, I kind of feel that way too. And the refrigerator was just a convenient storage method while he
I,
was doing the killing.
I think so too.
Yeah.
And clearly he did not take any sort of food safety or, you know, foodborne illness training, because
No.
if you have raw meat like that, you want to put that on the bottom shelf, not in the middle there where you have your blood drippings that can get over
Yeah.
your dairies, your
Everything.
cheeses and your salads and your such. So but just notice from me, having worked in food service, just that's not the right way to store meat, and uncovered too. So so she's dead, and then we get right to, the Friday the 13th part two. The
Hmm.
title, we've got the of course all the credits, and then
Hmm.
we cut to Sandra and Jeff,
Hmm.
who are on their way to a camp counselor training retreat that
Hmm.
is on the same lake. So this is on Crystal Lake, but
Hmm.
it's not Camp Crystal Lake. It happens to share the same shore, but is on the other side of the lake. So, and they
Hmm.
make it clear, do not go over to where Camp Crystal Lake is.
Yeah.
It's an urban legend, but don't do it.
Yeah.
You know,
Definitely don't go over there.
right. They're trying to find directions. Yeah, we've gone a long way. I mean, I remember we were in the same age or the age where at least the cutting edge technology for us was to print out Mapquest directions, or at least pull up Mapquest and write it all
Oh,
down on a piece of paper.
Mapquest.
And then that just needs to guide you. I don't know how I made it to the places I was trying to go.
I know. Like we were just looking down at printed out pieces of paper on our laps while we're supposed to be driving. And
Dangerous.
this, yeah, like at least they pull over and have to like make a phone call. But wouldn't directions like take a left at the old cemetery and then, a right down the old dirt road? I'd be like, this is sounding like a lot of red flags getting to
Yeah.
this camp. Like,
I'm
I don't like these directions.
I'm not making a left at any cemetery and
Yeah.
nothing that is old and dirt.
The
I'm not
old,
doing it.
yeah, they call it the old cemetery and then the old dirt road.
No, thank you. I'm
No,
good.
absolutely not.
That is a one-way ticket to that cemetery.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
no,
it
thank
is.
you. They pull over and call their boy Ted, who I guess only happens to live like up the road, or at least within a short sprint distance, because it's not like they
Hmm.
followed that truck very far. You do have your intro to Ralph, normal
He's
ass Ralph,
back. Thank thank goodness normal ass Ralph is back.
and tries to warn them from the beginning, like in a somewhat creepy way, yes, but like, look, he is who he is,
Yeah.
and I mean, again, if he came to me and said that, I would be like, oh, okay, maybe let's just not go.
Or
If
like even ask somebody else like at the shop or the gas station and be like, "Hey, why is he telling us not to go to this camp? Do you know anything?" Because everybody in the fucking town would know.
right,
Like it wouldn't just be like if you just asked one other person, a totally like regular guy at the fucking convenience store is gonna be like, "Oh yeah, a bunch of people got murdered over there. You definitely shouldn't go stay there." And
well,
that's
and
all you
like
need.
even if say the people don't think that Jason's still alive, I mean, like even the deputy was like, don't fuck around over there. Like,
Yeah.
I know that y'all like sure people appreciate what you're doing, Paul, but you could take this shit a couple counties over.
Hmm.
So even, the more allegedly level-headed part of the townspeople, it's all to say the same shit. So
Yeah.
I don't know. But we can't have a movie like this if we don't have dumb teenagers walking into
Hmm.
dangerous situations.
And I've seen these movies a million times. I never knew that Camp Crystal Lake is supposed to be in New Jersey. Did you know that?
No,
So
no, you're right. You're right. And then Elm
they have
Street
Jersey
is
plates.
and Elm Street's in Ohio, correct?
Yeah. So they
Right.
have Jersey license plates, and that's what got me to looking. I started like doing some research,
Hmm.
the lack of research team. And it's supposed to take place in Hardwick, New Jersey, which is only 2 hours away from where I grew up in New Jersey. So this whole time, I had no idea how close I was to Camp Blood.
So I guess getting to Manhattan probably wasn't. No, you probably still wouldn't go by boat, I don't think.
Probably not. And Hardwick is like very, very north Jersey. So he wouldn't have been too far from Manhattan.
Hmm. Okay. So while they're asking Ted for directions, their truck is getting towed. You never see this tow driver again, I don't think.
Mm-mm. No, he's just there for the prank. And then he's like, all right, bye, kids, have fun.
See, that was very traumatizing to me too, because first of all, well, my car's been towed a number of times. Um, when I was living in like very busy populated metropolitan areas,
Yeah.
like Capitol Hill and Seattle, and like when the parts I was living in San Francisco, and those fuckers do move quick. Like
Yeah.
they're just like bam, tied up, go, go, go. And then
They
I've
have to.
been in that position where I'm like, hey, 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 please, please, hold on, hold on. And then they'll just fucking ignore me, won't say
Yeah.
shit.
That's their
So
job.
this is very real for me. And good on him for chasing his truck all the way through.
I
Literally, I guess
know.
up the hill around the corner to Ted's place.
Yeah, apparently the old cemetery and the old dirt road weren't that far away because he didn't even seem out of breath
Right.
chasing after the tow truck. But
The both of them.
that's a pretty fucked up prank. Like, I'm sorry, are you my friend? Because We would not be after that.
100%.
For the record, my car has never been towed,
Good for you.
as I know to park in proper places.
I don't. But this is when you meet Ted. Ted's a weirdo. Um,
Mhm.
but Ted is also one of like the training staff for this camp counseling training situation that Paul runs
Mhm.
with a staff of Ted and Ginny, who we'll meet
Yeah.
shortly. So then once we find Ted, let me get this all together in my head. The three of them get in the truck and head over to this place. Now they find a tree that's in the middle of the road, which I'm like, if Jason put that there, like, how long was that like going to be effective? Someone was going to move that tree branch
Yeah. And
or tree trunk or
another
whatever.
red flag.
Yeah, definitely. Um, at this point, while they're moving the tree out of the way, Sandra finds an old, dirty, broken sign for Camp Crystal Lake.
Hmm.
Ted's like, don't worry about it.
No
Put
big
this
deal.
put this shit down, no big deal. Let's not talk about it. Don't worry about it. Let's fucking go. You know. And then they make their way to the camp. This is where we are introduced to our camp counselors. Now, a lot of them, I'm just not going to know their names because
That's
it's
fine.
just not important. I mean, half of them take off into town and stay in town that whole night anyway.
Yeah, so some of them just have a great night at the bar and don't even realize that any of this shit went down.
See, not all camp counselors get murdered, right?
Yeah,
Just the
there you
ones that
go.
stay at the camp,
Yeah,
right?
they were there too late.
So this is when you are introduced, well, to Paul, who is kind of the main head honcho of this camp counseling training regimen thing that he's got. And he's like, we need to take this back to basics. You know, we've let the socialists and the fucking whoever the fucks, I don't know, ruin camp counseling for us. And we're going to bring this shit back to basics. It's going to be some archery, some swimming, some hot dog contests. I don't know if you mentioned that, but they do have hot dogs later. Um, and he's like a little bit of a stiff, you know, but
Yeah.
he is kind of the adult of the group.
Yeah. So he needs to maintain some level of respect and authority because if it's only him and fucking Ted fucking around half the time, and then Jenny who's showing up late,
Mhm.
he's gotta keep it together.
So clearly and he does leave all of those camp counselors to die at that camp. So kind of between all of that, I just feel like as camp counselors, I don't think that Paul or Ginny have learned their lessons. It's almost institutional, right?
Hmm.
To train camp counselors to be neglectful.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why we need to go back to the drawing board and say, look, we can avoid all of this mass death if we just look at our processes, rewrite the manual, and have some more accountability in our training. Um,
Or just don't have camp at on campgrounds where mass murder has happened before.
that's true. A little victim blamey, but sure, yes, I think that is also reasonable.
Yeah.
And that's a reasonable path forward as well, right?
Find a different
Um,
camp.
So you've got, like I said, you've got, Sandra and Jeff. You're also introduced to Mark, to Vicky, to Terry, to Scott. I have this list in front of me. I don't know their names
Yeah,
off the
there's
top of
so
my
many of
head.
them.
Yeah. And then all the others, because I'd
Mhm.
say there's probably like 10 camp counselors total. And then
Yeah, there's
like
a decent number of them.
six stay behind, and then like five or six go out,
Hmm.
so literally half of them we're not going to know about.
Yeah.
Yeah, Paul. When he's like his rules are, are pretty bad, and then for some reason most all directed to the women,
Yeah.
especially like especially when it's comes off warding bears, which I think have there's some what's some word that's an urban legend maybe we could debunk a little bit is
Yeah.
he's like,
What does
hey,
he say? He says keep hygienic when you're on your menstrual cycle.
I think he just says like keep yourselves clean when you're
Yeah.
menstruating. To which I'm
Like they're just not like what?
and then this is I can blame the public school system for this. Uh, again, it's institutions, Natalie. This is where we need to get it upstream because men know so little about how that whole process works.
Very true.
Didn't they just find out there's been like lead in tampons the whole fucking time? Did you read that whole thing? Oh my God. And this is
There's
be
yeah, there's a lot of issues with tampons. They don't have to say what's in them.
this is what male dominated science gets you, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
We're still feeling those repercussions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he says no perfume and keep yourselves clean when you menstruate. So hey,
Yeah.
all the women, out there, fuck.
Yeah.
Um, so this is when we're introduced to Ginny, who
Mm-hmm.
arrives in her busted ass little beetle.
It's so
Um,
loud.
that car's not going to work when we need it to later on either,
Yeah, it
unfortunately.
is the most obvious foreshadowing.
Paul's super pissed that she's there, but fucking get over yourself, Paul. Like, she's certainly not taking this seriously. And also, like, hey, fucking people show up late. Get the fuck out of here.
She's like super late. He's already halfway through that fucking presentation.
Was
Like,
she gonna give that presentation too?
I
I
mean,
I didn't see Ted doing
let's
anything.
let's show some fucking professionalism. Like, how do you expect again? Like, how do you expect to get these fucking teenagers to listen to you if you can't even show up on time? And
Again,
then you're like
institutional.
laughing at him, like, even though you're late. And anyone who says that they will never be late again, those are always the people who are fucking chronically late.
100%.
So you can never promise that you're never going to be late again. So if you say that, you are chronically late and you need to shut the fuck up and show up on time because that is not okay. I'm a
As
stickler for that.
as someone who is chronically late, uh, all the time, I stopped saying it'll never happen again because I know it'll happen
Yeah.
the next time. It's not
Yeah.
even
To-
it's not even like I get a couple mulligans each year. Like, no, I'm constantly late all the time. I was late to this recording.
You
So,
were. You absolutely were. But to be clear, I'm late to anything that isn't work related. I am late to everything else. And that's very intentional because I don't like to be the first one to arrive anywhere.
yeah, that's fair. Yeah, no one likes to be the
Yeah.
first to
No one,
arrive
yeah,
anyway.
you don't want to be like having small talk, awkwardness. Yeah, none of that.
I mean, I just remember like the rule is like, hey, if a party starts at 8, you show up at 9.
Oh my God, 9. That's very late. I
But
would
that's
say 8:30.
that's more of like a kegger
Yeah,
rager kind of thing. I
yeah.
would show up late to those. Um, so Paul gets over it. Um, Ginny really has the full power here, as we
Oh,
know.
for sure. Yeah.
Especially because at the end of the day, he's a dude, he's a horn dog. So
Hmm.
you learn that they are also romantically entangled. Like,
Hmm.
let's hey, if you're gonna be a stickler for someone being late, how about not having sex with your staff? How's that sound? Like if we're gonna be picky and choosy on what
I mean, this seems like a pretty loosey-goosey situation where everybody can fuck everybody, even if they're like coworkers.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I'm not gonna give him a hard time for that.
So everyone gets settled in, and then we go to the campfire that night. And this is when Paul is telling the story about Jason Voorhees and
Why?
Mrs. Voorhees. And it's funny because he's like, he gives the whole spiel, right? And he tells the
Mhm.
story, basically exactly how it went. And then Ted, of course, like wearing that mask and the spear, which we'll see later. Um, he does like a boogaloo, and scares
Yeah.
everybody. And Paul's like, all right. Now that we got that out of our systems, still don't go over there though, because like she was murdered and Jason is, don't worry, that kid's probably dead. So
Yeah, he really makes like fun of it and then is like, no, but seriously, don't don't fuck around and find out over there. But
yeah,
what I do really like about Paul's storytelling is that he pretty much is spot on about Jason's motivations, what his plans are, what sets him off. Like he knows way too much.
do you think he brings the camp counselors there? Is he in cahoots?
That would be really interesting if he was,
I
but
like that.
no.
Yeah, but
Or
no.
or Jason listened to the story and was like, "Oh shit, actually, he's he's got something. He's got my gears turning here."
Oh yeah, it's like when I talk to my therapist and they're just like, you know, I have this like aha moment, and I was like, oh my God, maybe I do have mom issues. It's
Yeah,
like,
that's what
I
happened to Jason.
the reason I do keep her severed head and tattered sweater in a shack in the middle of the woods, like, I guess there is something to that, huh? So I like that aha moment. Maybe, yeah, he was watching from
Yeah,
the woods,
yeah.
being like,
He has no friends. Like
man,
that's like the first people he's heard talk. So he's like, oh man, he's a smart guy.
it reminds me of or just that response from Dewey in Scream 5, where like probably Jason's like, man, maybe you're the killer, Paul. Because that cut deep.
It cut deep.
That cut deep over here. Um, so the kids are all like, yeah, sure, okay. Except for Sandra. Sandra is very much like, I want
She's
to see
into
that.
it.
I want to see this shit right now.
Yeah.
Jeff, you gonna be a little chicken shit? You're gonna come with me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know. I've had people I'm attracted to bully me into doing things I didn't want to do. So I get where Jeff is coming from.
But hey, you're still alive.
That's true. I'm so because I didn't ultimately listen. I was like, no, I'm not going into that abandoned mine. It was the site of those grisly murders 30 years ago on this very night. No, thank you, please.
Coming from the same person who said he would go into a neighborhood that had no one living into it in an abandoned house if Megan Fox was the one luring you in as a teenage boy.
Did I say Megan Fox or did I just say
You didn't
any
say Megan
woman?
Fox. You said any woman,
Okay.
but
I was
I'm
like, I
just
don't think it even needs
referencing
to be Megan
I'm
Fox.
referencing Jennifer's body specifically,
Yeah.
but you did say that you would go into that building if you thought that you might get laid as a teenager. So,
When
I
hormones take
mean,
over, the brain shuts off. And so that's why, like, I ultimately don't blame Jeff.
no,
So,
I don't think you should.
but the kids are doing, I guess, what kids do in the cabin. Everyone's kind of, a couple people are dancing. There's a couple like kind of Game Boy-esque kind of old
Yeah,
video
this is real
games,
old.
giant ass brick fucking things, even though the original Game Boy was so giant ass fucking brick.
Yeah.
But Jenny, who's just fucking again owning Paul, having complete control this
Oh,
over a
yeah.
over a chess game, being like, you
Hmm.
checkmate, motherfucker, I'm getting the fuck out of
Yeah.
here. I'm gonna go to bed. Goodbye. So she takes off and goes over to her cabin.
Hmm.
Um, she's getting dressed. Um, I don't know like if she was like supposed to take a shower or something. She just like switches from like a sweater to like another like a heavy robe.
Yeah, she's wearing a full pants still
Yeah,
underneath the robe and her bra, which like we know these movies aren't afraid of nudity, so none of that makes sense.
right.
Yeah.
She hears a knock at the door. Fake out. It's just Paul. I don't know how he got in there, but he's being a creeper. Yeah, also kind of another fake out because you see like the point of view from like behind the camera of someone watching from the woods.
Hmm.
That's not Jason yet. That's
Crazy Ralph.
Ralph, just normal ass Ralph. And maybe in this case, pervy Ralph, because he's there, you know,
Yeah, he's watching her from the window. Like he could have knocked at the door and been giving warnings.
yeah, 100%.
Hmm. The
Unless he
pervy
like
Ralph.
unless he knocked at the door and then ran into he was the one that knocked and then ran back behind the tree to watch like a weirdo. But don't worry, he is not being normal or crazy or anything for that much longer.
No.
Because you have your second returning survivor murdered.
Hmm.
So I think your first two kills, right?
Which
Um,
feels like a waste. I would have liked to see Ralph in
all the movies.
as many movies as he like lived through in real life. Like I'm assuming that actor is gone now considering his age in this film. But um I would have liked to see him in as many sequels as there are.
I think so too, especially because like the townsfolk have like I won't say like an integral part in these movies, but there's
Hmm.
always some people in the town that are like also kind of part of the plot, or at least have some proximity to what's going on too. But
Yeah.
I would have liked him as your kind of you know, yeah, you're wise man. You're like,
Yeah.
I've seen this before, blah 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 blah. And of course no one listens to him ever. Maybe that would just
Hmm.
be the running joke. But
Okay, he died in 2004 at the age of 91, so he could have been in a lot of these movies.
yeah, that's wild that he was already nearly 70 when that first one came out.
Mhm.
So um he's dead.
Yeah, he's dead.
And you cut to the next morning. Now this is when Ginny wakes up, and I don't want to say I know what you did last summer style because this happened, 17 years prior, but it doesn't say, it says like beware of bears like in lipstick like on her mirror.
Yeah.
Who wrote that? Is
I
that
don't
Paul?
know. I don't think Paul would have written it because he seemed to actually think that that was a serious thing. So I don't think he would be making light of it. I would bet that was fucking Ted.
You think so? Or maybe Paul knew that she was menstruating and just left that note for her,
He would know. I mean,
right? Because he would take that seriously and be like, well, look, okay, if this is now what's going on, then we need to beware of bears. So let me
let
write
me
that where
write
I
it in
know
your
you will see it.
lipstick.
Yeah.
Feels
Um,
dramatic.
the the campers are all up and going. They don't actually start their like full training, I think, until like it isn't meant to be until the following day. They don't
Hmm.
actually ever get to train. So are they ever
Yeah.
really actually camp counselors?
No.
Who the fuck's Jason killing? He doesn't kill any of the actual camp
They're
counselors.
they're future camp counselors.
I
So
suppose so. Hmm.
that's their purpose of going to the camp.
So he's like
So
thinking, I need to go upstream and kill them even before they become camp counselors officially.
yeah, because once they become camp counselors, who knows who else is going to drown with this poor training.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, so
So
he's probably like, I'm going to save these kids. Maybe Jason's the hero.
maybe one thing I do appreciate is we have a dog in this movie and this dog lives. Hey,
Yeah.
hey, Muffin.
But also, this dog lives, even though I don't remember Muffin's mom's name, but
Terry.
Terry is not too concerned with Muffin because like Muffin's missing. She's like running around looking for Muffin, looking slightly concerned. And then they're like, Terry, lunch. And she's like, oh, fuck that dog. I need to go eat lunch. Like, I'd be concerned where my tiny little dog is in the fucking forest where we know there are bears.
Right?
Like,
I
come
would say
on, Terry.
even, I mean, even like cats, like cats can generally fend for themselves. They still have that predator spirit, whereas that hasn't been completely bred out of them. Whereas like
Yeah.
dogs, especially a dog like Muffin,
That dog, Muffin would be apparently not, but Muffin
yeah,
should have been fucked. And not like Jason wasn't even the biggest threat.
yeah. So Muffin does walk up upon two boots
Yeah.
connected to two legs, connected to a person, and that
Mhm.
you're supposed to think is Jason. Um,
Mhm.
and you got this like kind of nervous whimper. Like this dog knows, like, oh, this is a dangerous situation. How the fuck did the dog know?
Well,
But it's
if he was wearing a bag over his head, maybe.
I suppose so. Yeah, that's true. Things like that. My
Yeah.
dog doesn't like bags, especially paper bags. Just the sound of it, they just can't handle it.
Yeah. So
So
imagine if you put the paper bag on your head.
so you think Muffin's dead.
Hmm.
Don't worry, y'all. Muffin's gonna be a-okay.
Muffin's okay.
Yeah. Well, maybe
Most
a-okay.
likely. I feel like if Muffin made it that far, Jason was not concerned with Muffin.
Right. But it was a really silly, dumb edit where it's like it cuts right from Muffin to the hot dogs on the
I
grill.
love that.
Yeah. To which
Yeah,
I'm like,
I love it.
did Jason make hot dogs out of Muffin? I don't know.
that, that would have been real sick.
And Terry's, of course, walking around trying to pretend like she cares about Muffin. She's like, have you all seen him? Nobody answers. She's like, oh, whatever. It's like even
Yeah, she's
later
like,
on. Yeah, she's like, oh,
yeah.
hot dogs. Okay, that sounds pretty good. Or like, rustling in the woods, can't find muffin. Mm,
Mhm.
ooh, but there's a lake. Let me take my top off.
Yeah.
You know,
She's
uh,
very easily distracted for sure.
right. And which will be her undoing.
Mhm.
Um, Now from there they go to the lake. Everyone's like, oh, let's go to the lake and swim, have a good time. Sandra's like, this is our chance. Let's fucking head over there. Come on, you chicken shit. Let's go.
Glad they go during the day at least.
At least they go during the day. That
Yes,
is,
smart.
I guess, something.
The smartest way that they could have done something so dumb.
I agree. Because Jason doesn't. No, I guess he does kill during the day. I mean, he
Yeah,
killed the
for
deputy
sure.
during the day and later on.
Yeah.
Um, so, but again, just like Back to the Future, it's like fucking don't give in to someone calling you chicken because it's
Yeah.
never gonna work out for you, whether it's fucking Sandra or fucking Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Like, you say no. Just say no. You're gonna be okay. And you'll be able to get that truck and go on that camp. Because he was also supposed to go camping too. I'm gonna go down a rabbit hole, so don't even worry about that. So you're also kind of further led to believe that Muffin is dead because Sandra and Jeff, they go over the no trespassing signs and the barbed
Mhm.
wire, keeping people away from Camp Crystal Lake. And they do find that mutilated animal.
Mhm.
The fur was like kind of like whitish, grayish, so like you thought it maybe could be Muffin.
Yeah, that was a clever little trick because you're like, oh man, they found Muffin. But really, I think what they found is one of Jason's meals, maybe. I'm assuming he like hunts things and just eats them raw, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. And they
Yeah.
talk about that, right? That he's like been living off like the vegetation and eating animals and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that,
Mm-hmm.
which makes sense, that Jason would
Yeah.
be. They kind of explain it a little more in that remake where he's more of this like
Like very
survivalist type.
survivalist. Yeah. I know. I
Mm.
always I'm like, so was Jason alive this whole time? Or like was he actually dead in that lake and he was already a zombie? I always get confused by that. Maybe that's the age difference.
They don't make it far into Camp Crystal Lake because they're thwarted by the deputy.
Mhm.
He's like, y'all need to get the fuck out of here. Let's go.
Yeah.
And then he takes them over to Paul
Hmm.
and is mad at Paul because he's like, these kids need to be fucking reprimanded.
Yeah.
You need to fucking beat them. Paul makes a joke being like, all right, fucking
I
no
like
second dessert, you
I
know.
like I like his no second dessert joke. But yeah, he is the world's most like motivated cop, like for how he wants these kids to be punished and then how he's just willing to like run out into those woods.
I know.
Yeah.
So it's like, let the legal system take care of this, bro. You don't need to be fucking judge, Judy, and executioner here, bro.
Yeah.
And and it works out because he dies pretty soon anyway. I think he's our next
Hmm.
kill.
He is.
Now the officer's just driving back and then sees Jason run across the road into the woods. He pulls over,
Hmm.
goes after him, and then this is where we find the shed that Jason's been
Hmm.
living in. Not only just the shed, but this shrine that has Mrs. Voorhees' severed head. I don't know what Jason does with the rest of her body, but
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah. Maybe he just left it, put
he
it in the
took the
lake.
sweater off, so he's like taking the clothes off her
Hmm.
and was able to get all that, before. And I guess grabbed the head. Maybe the coroner ended up taking the body, and they're like, "Yeah, we don't know what happened to the head, but what can you
And the
do?"
head, I mean, the body would be much harder to move around than just the head. So,
True.
if he maybe has like warm and fuzzy feelings towards the sweater, maybe he remembers her wearing that.
Mm,
So he's like, I'm going to take the sweater and I'm going to take her beautiful face.
yeah. So deputy finds this, really doesn't have much time to react because Jason's right
No.
behind him. And then, oh man, getting hit in the head with a hammer is hard, but the
Oh,
back of the hammer, that's almost even
oh,
worse.
yeah, because it's the force of the hammer and the just that
It'll go in.
stabbing. Oh, yeah.
So he's dead. That's our third death so far.
Hmm.
So we cut back over to the camp, and then this is when Paul is telling everybody, hey, we're gonna start our training in more formal capacity tomorrow. So I'm gonna offer y'all, if you all want to go into town for one more night before we get into the nitty-gritty of all of this, please be my guest. And then this is when of course, Paul and Ginny and Ted, the adults of this group, relatively, they're going to go into town, as well as a
Mhm.
bunch of unnamed counselors
Yeah.
who all got getting, I guess, all getting, they take Jeff's truck.
Yeah, because they all get in the back of the truck.
But it's not like Jeff is going, you know because Jeff stays
Hmm.
behind. So that's nice of him to borrow his truck.
Yeah.
So, but the people that stay behind are, I think, actually just all of our named counselors. So
Hmm.
you've got Vicky and Mark, um, Terry, Scott, and then Sandra and Jeff. So
Hmm.
who are our
They're next.
fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth,
Yeah.
you know, kills.
Yeah.
So
They start going real quick.
they all start going really quick because, oh gosh, I
Hmm.
was just like, there's really only 35 minutes, 40 minutes maybe left of this movie when all the camp counselors start getting killed. So
Yeah,
it
they
takes
do
a little
take
bit to
it.
get there.
They take it pretty slow in the beginning. It doesn't feel that way though when you're watching it. Like I didn't feel like the pacing is slow. I kind of like that they all kind of,
I agree.
Jason takes advantage of the group separating.
So, of course, we've got our six counselors that stay behind of that group. Terry is like, I'm still gonna go find Muffin.
Yeah, she's like, I guess I should stay since my dog is just running around in the wilderness. Should probably check on that.
Just maybe. And then
Yeah.
Scott's like, I'm gonna stay because I've been perving on Terry. And maybe if I keep
Hmm.
slingshotting her in the ass and taking her clothes and
It's
shit,
stealing her clothes. That's a surefire way to
that's a
not
way.
get fucked.
Yeah.
Like it's not gonna happen.
Which is hard
You're
because
12.
he is a strikingly handsome man.
If he just went up to her and was just kind and starting conversation, be like, hey, can I get you a beer? My panties would be off. Come on. Like,
Yeah.
he is so hot. Like,
Let,
why do you have to be a dick, man?
let's get married. Let's start an auto repair company together. Like, let's fucking do
Yes.
it.
Yes.
I will follow your dreams with you, Scott.
Absolutely.
Or whatever his character's name was.
Rick.
Rick, right.
Yeah.
So, um, you have this scene with Terry, of course, with the most gratuitous nudity in the movie. Um,
Yeah, which makes sense as to that actress like is in crazy shape. The shirts that they put her in are not shirts. Like they're like
yeah.
barely covering her. So I was like, okay, it makes sense that she's going to be the one that gets naked. But do we think that this is what triggered Jason? Because she gets in that lake and I'm like, okay, now she's on his turf. Because even if it's not like at the camp
The
of
lake
Crystal Lake,
itself,
the
yeah.
lake itself, like he drowned there because of them. So the audacity of anyone getting into that fucking lake, he's like, oh, now I have to kill all of you.
And I'll still try to almost defend that it's just circumstance that she happens to be naked. And it's not like she dies naked.
She doesn't die naked, no. And she wouldn't be naked as long if it weren't for, you know, her
Scott,
clothes being stolen. Yeah.
yeah.
Fucking Scott. I almost
So
said Rick.
I just would not, I would just, I don't know. I don't think I would go skinny dipping in a lake by myself in the dark where I know
Mm-mm.
multiple murders had
Mm-mm.
happened. I just don't think that's a good idea. I just like
No.
the idea of just like having like all my like parts exposed in like lake water too, because I don't know, it's all
Well,
fucking
I'm not defending Scott in any way here or blaming or
uh-huh.
blaming Terry, but if there's one thing I'm not going to do, it's leave all my clothes behind when there's no one else. She doesn't think anyone else is with her.
Yeah.
Like and then go and skinny dip. Like if that's gonna happen, like I'm gonna be skinny dipping with someone else at least. So that way we're both fucking naked and alone and afraid instead of, just as soon as someone takes your clothes and you're in the wilderness, like you're fucked.
Yeah,
That, and not the kind of fuck that Scott would like.
I know. Um, so Scott is an asshole.
Hmm.
She's getting out of the water. Her clothes are gone. Doesn't make it far because Scott like pokes his head out like a fucking asshole, and he's like hee, starts like slowly throwing some of her clothes back to her, and I'm like,
Like
Scott,
a
dude,
child.
like a fucking child, Scott.
Yeah.
And good, like he fucking deserves, like an asshole. He steps into
Mhm.
that, like, I don't know what you call that, like rope trap that, like,
I
you
don't know
know.
what those are called either, but I think he says that he thinks it's Ted, and I'm like, I don't think Ted goes that hard. Like that's Jason.
So he's hanging upside down. He's like, please let me down. Terry's rightfully like, should I though? Fuck
Yeah.
you. But whatever, fine. Oh, so she goes back to the cabin, finds a Swiss Army knife eventually,
Hmm.
comes back to get Ted, or sorry, get Scott. And in between this happening, Scott gets his throat slit by
Hmm.
Jason, so he's fucking dead. I do like when she comes back and she's still talking to him, being like,
Yeah,
"You
being all
dumb little
sassy.
fuck," getting sassy with him. It's like, ah, all right, I'm cutting you down. I should just leave you here, and then finding out that he's very fucking dead.
Hmm.
Um, and then Terry turns around, screams. You're under the impression that she sees Jason and she dies, but you see nothing.
Hmm.
So no, even like a knife coming up towards her or
Yeah, that is strange.
anything. It's just a scream, then it kind of cuts away. So as
Yeah.
far as I'm concerned, she might still have the same fate as Muffin. So
Yeah.
I'd like to believe that Terry is still okay.
I don't think she is.
I don't think so either, because I do also think that maybe ooh, I think Ginny does. Maybe it's her body that she finds in the
Yeah, I
shed
was gonna say,
later.
isn't one of her body one of the bodies that's in the shed?
I think so too. So then I'm just like, knock against this movie because we don't like off-screen kills. Like, come on,
Yeah, no.
the fuck out of here. I don't like that,
Mm-mm.
especially because all the kills are still pretty tame in this one.
Yeah, I think the hammer to the head actually is probably one of the more like just it gives you that like that feeling of ick when you
Mm.
see the hammer hit his head, even though it's pretty quick.
I think we'll see. I think maybe the Sandra and Jeff kill with the spear through the both of them. Also, like, I still
Mm.
know what you did last summer.
Hmm.
Yeah, 20 something
You
years
don't,
prior.
yeah, you don't see a lot though with that one. You see the spear like beneath them with the blood, but not the
And that's
insertion from the top.
and that was because that part was like heavily edited down. A lot of these initial movies were all had to like
Yeah.
fight to get rated R's,
Yeah.
and this one, I know that was one scene that was cut down quite a bit,
Hmm.
um, of them getting stabbed while they were having sex. So,
That makes
which,
sense.
I get it.
Yeah.
So where are we now? Terry's dead. So is
Yeah.
Scott. And now I think we cut over to the
You
bar
go to
that's
the
in
bar.
town. Yeah. We've got that band that's just killing it playing. I'd love to be in one of those fucking little like roadhouse kind of bands, out in
Yeah.
the middle of
Just play every
nowhere.
night.
Oh yeah, hell yeah. And everyone's having a good time. It's a pretty packed place. You're following that waitress for a little while, and then you cut to the other end of the bar where you've got Ted and Paul and Jenny. Um, dang, fucking Ted just keeping account of like how many beers he's pounded through at this point. He
Hmm.
better not be fucking driving that truck. Paul made a good
No.
call there. Um, and they start talking more about this urban legend, the
Hmm.
story of Jason and his mom. And
Hmm.
you get this hint earlier on that Ginny is this kind of like wannabe aspiring child psychologist,
Hmm.
and she talks about it a little more. Now, of course, with some problematic language. She
Frightened
drops
R
some,
word.
yeah, she drops some unfortunate language.
Yeah.
Also calls him like a boy beast, It's like,
Does
did
she
she?
say boy beast? She says
Yeah.
child in a man's body as well. So she's like just throwing out all these different theories, which honestly, like some of her theories, like the child in a man's body situation, you're like, I mean, yeah, like if no one has been caring for him since he was a child and he's just been on his own in the wilderness, like that could be a pretty bad situation.
I've seen it work,
And it
right? You've
is.
got your Jungle Book and your George of the Jungle types, but at least you
Hmm.
had,
But they were lovingly cared for by animals.
whereas Jason was murdering all of these
He was
animals.
murdering all the animals. They came to care for him, and he was like, lunch.
I know he probably has some Bear Baloo type of situation where
Yeah.
just singing him bare necessities, and he's like, "No, I'm gonna fucking kill you."
I'm gonna slice you up with my machete
I
instead.
know. Oh, so,
I
but
don't have
what
time
is
for
what?
this interspecies family dynamics.
um, but gosh, would have that been such a cute little family though? So they're talking about this, and Paul and Ted are just very much like, "Get the fuck out of here. This is, it's nothing,
They're like, who cares?
It's an urban legend. It happened 5 years
Yeah.
ago." And then even still, I'm just like, I don't know. It seems like a lot of people are still weird enough about this. And if it's an urban legend, why is there barbed wire around all of the camp? And why are the
Mm-hmm.
cops like all weird about it? Like if this is all nothing, and I mean, even Paul like admitted, like, oh yeah, no, I guess there was a Mrs. Voorhees and she's dead, but Jason's
Yeah.
dead too, so don't worry.
Yeah.
So it's
Although
not
we
an
have
urban
no proof
legend.
of that. Yeah.
Right. So now we are kind of cutting back and forth between, the bar
Hmm.
and then back at the camp where we have our
Yeah.
remaining campers. We've got four left, keeping track. Now that Terry and Scott are out.
Yep.
So I do like how, the women are they're the sexually forward ones,
Other than Scott.
other than Scott just being a creep, and
Hmm.
you see where that gets him, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And but at least like Sandra's just like, hey, don't cut it out with that arm wrestling. Like I need your energy for upstairs. Which I'm
And
like,
she subtly like is like so subtle of like, hey, like, does your dick work? Like she very subtly asks that.
you're talking about
Oh, I'm
Vicky.
talking about Vicky. I'm talking about Vicky. God damn it, there's so many of them. Yeah, Sandra. Okay, Sandra definitely. Yeah, she's down to fuck. She's running upstairs.
And
Yeah.
Vicky is double down to fuck because Vicky
Yeah.
makes no, like, she is not hiding any of it. She is
Mm-mm.
like, is that dick work?
Yeah.
Because I mean, she was already over that before. She was already all over him before she could confirm
Uh-huh.
that. But
Yeah.
she's like, hey, go, let's play some video games. The rules, the winner is I get to fuck you. How's that sound?
Yeah.
Which is great. And Vicky's probably my favorite character in the movie. And I think just she's just nice and she's cute,
Oh, poor Vicky.
I think so too. And Mark, he explains, his motorcycle accident. And again, like when you're
Hmm.
watching, it's just like, oh man, this is all so sad. Because like,
I
he's gonna get fucking
know.
murdered. Like he's trying to
Yes.
work his way out of this wheelchair.
Yeah.
Sorry, I forgot to bring that up. Mark is
He will
using a
not. Yeah.
wheelchair.
Yeah. He will not get the chance.
And yeah, he will not get the chance. And just such a strange death. But
I like his death.
yeah, which I mean, I guess we'll get to pretty quickly.
Hmm.
Vicky's like, all right, we're gonna come back over to my cabin, but let me go ahead and get ready first.
Hmm.
She starts getting cute. Um, this is also when the storm is starting as well.
Yes. Yes.
Um, as Vicky's getting ready, I don't wear perfume. I would just think spraying it on my genitals is a bad idea. I don't I don't know what you can confirm.
Um,
Seems like just a bad idea.
but she sprays it over her underwear, right?
No, she like opens her underwear and sprays inside her underwear.
Oh, yeah. No, I would not recommend that. So, while
Not a good idea.
I've never done that. A lot of perfumes have a really high like alcohol content. So, you really don't want to spray that down there. Like you can spray it any other which place. Like, and also like why are you trying to what are you trying to cover up, girl? Like at that point, just hit the shower. Like, and then spray your perfume everywhere else. Like,
I
yeah,
know.
I don't know that Also, I don't know that that would be a turn on to just like smell flowers.
Well, and just with how strong perfume is,
Oh, the
let's
taste of
say
it is not good either. Have you ever tasted perfume?
no, but
Yeah, so like I've gotten it on my hand and then like accidentally like tasted it and because I'm just sticking my hands in my mouth all the time, gross. And it tastes exactly like just like this, I don't even know, like just chemicals.
yeah, it's like the
Yeah.
it's like that scene in Elf, where they offer him the fruit spray and he's like, "Oh,
Yes.
yes, please." And he sprays it in his mouth and
Yeah,
then
and
he's
he does
like,
not like the taste. Yeah, it tastes nasty. Perfume tastes nasty.
yeah, so
I've gotten it in my mouth.
I feel like Mark was going to find out. If Mark was a kind lover, he was going to find out that
Well, he
like,
implies
oh,
that too, because when she asks if it works, he's like, it
I
does, but just in case, I've got other I got other tricks up my sleeve, and I'm like, okay, Mark, okay,
I love his
yeah,
confidence.
me
Um,
too.
so never gets to test that confidence because
Damn.
he's back at the cabin. He hears a sound outside, thinks it might be Vicky. So he comes out to the outside patio, doesn't see anything, but then bam, right behind him, Jason's there, machete right through him. Kind of kills him the same way that Ginny allegedly kills Jason, like just that machete right through the shoulder. And
Yeah.
then he,
Oh no, it goes through his head.
oh no, you're right. It
For
goes through his
Mark.
head.
Mark, it
You're
goes
right.
right through his head because I like that it like hits him in the head and then he rolls back and he's like going down the stairs. It's all very over the top.
Yeah, which was kind of like a weird, like, I guess like kind of ironic, but then kind of like fucked up. I don't know. To like then also just then
Hmm.
stumble down like just that long thing of stairs. And I think
Yeah.
even I remember they show that like once or twice, like in future movies, like when they do flashbacks to this movie.
Yeah.
I just remember they keep showing that one. I'm like, why do we have to focus on this death and like or that part of it? I'm like,
I guess it just looks different than the others. So they're like, oh, something visually different.
right. Now Vicky doesn't come back yet. Normally, the way a lot of these kills go is you kill one person in the couple, and then the other person finds them and that gets killed. So
Hmm.
at least you've got this wait until Vicky comes back to the cabin because Jason then immediately goes upstairs. He sees the mask that Ted behind left behind, as well as the
Hmm.
spear that he used, and yeah, just goes right upstairs and it doesn't really take too long.
Mm-mm.
And Sandra, of course, notices first because they're missionary at this point.
Hmm.
So she can see, and bam, spear right through the both of them. And now you've got one camp counselor left, which is poor
Yeah.
Vicky.
I mean, that was efficient of Jason,
He's probably the most
two
efficient
and
in
one.
this movie.
Yeah.
Like the deaths are real clean, real quick, and
Hmm.
he can
He's
move the
not have
bodies.
time, not have time to mess around.
Yeah, I think he probably just doesn't get the same enjoyment out of it that he does later on.
Yeah. I know. I always wonder, I'm like, does he enjoy this? Or is it just like this is my work. This is what I have to do. Like my mom is telling me to.
I guess
I
it's for Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees, it seems more of out of a sense of duty,
yeah.
whereas with Freddy Krueger and Chucky, it's for the fun.
Yeah, it's for the fun. Yeah.
Like we're here to have fun, you
Yeah,
know. So both interesting and fun in their own ways, but I think maybe that's why I gravitate towards Freddy and Chucky,
for sure.
you
They're
know.
down to have a good time.
Yeah. So Vicky, once she's able, I think she gets her brush out of her car. She's sprayed down in perfume. She's ready to go. She's
Hmm.
DTF, and she gets back into the cabin, realizes everyone's gone. I don't think she ever finds Mark because Mark's just gone and down that stairway. Outside, it was like an outside staircase.
Yeah, yeah.
And she's like, where the fuck is everybody? She goes upstairs, calls for Sandra and Jeff, doesn't hear them, pokes her head inside, and Jason's just lying on the bed where they were.
I love that he's lying on the bed. And that's the first time that they show him with the bag
Yes.
and you see his little eyeball.
Yeah, it's one little
I
eyeball that
love his
like
one little eyeball.
he has to probably like tape. around his eyeball to make sure that that hole always stays in line with his eyeball so he can see, but I don't know how he does that. I just think it's
Because
gonna
that
be
is a
hard.
small, it is a small eye hole.
It is a very small eye hole.
Yeah.
And he only has the one. Why cut out the
Because his
one?
because his other eye is not like it may not be functional. I'm not sure, but
Hmm,
it's like not even with his I mean, I guess he could put a hole, but it might not be functional.
that's true. Or put a hole like where his other eye is relative to
Mm-hmm.
which, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
whatever.
And he
Um,
covers his face all the time, so obviously he feels self-conscious about it. So maybe he just wants to like just appear to have his one like normal looking eye.
right. So, um, Vicky then also, she backs up being like, what the fuck? And then also finds at least Jeff's body
Yeah.
hanging by the door. And she never has a fucking chance,
No.
there's no real like extended chase scenes outside of just the last one with Ginny
Yeah,
in
that's
this one.
true.
Whereas like in later movies, I feel like some other characters get some extended chase scenes outside of the final
Mm-hmm.
girl.
Mm-hmm.
So this is pretty quick. He's ready. He's got a kitchen knife and, cuts her leg. She backs up against the wall and then he finishes the job. And
Mm-hmm.
pretty quickly now all of your camp counselors are dead. At least the ones that
Yeah.
stayed behind. All the named ones that you're ever going to see again.
Yeah, they're gone.
Um, you also never see Ted again.
Oh yeah. So did Ted stay at the bar?
I mean, worked out for him that he probably just got just
He
drunk
was
and
so
fell asleep
drunk.
somewhere and
Yeah.
didn't make his way back. And he's like, wait, what the fuck happened the next day? Like,
Yeah.
so Ted, for all I know, is still okay. Um, this time now you've got Paul and Jenny who are have finally returned to camp.
Mm-hmm.
All the lights are on, everything's quiet. It's like, where the fuck is everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Paul's pretty quick to, I don't think he thinks it's like a joke necessarily, but he's just like, oh, it's probably it's nothing. Don't even worry. Like, yeah, it's weird that none of
Mm-hmm.
them are here, but we'll look for them, but it's nothing. Don't even worry about it. And all,
I would be really fucking freaked out.
I mean, of course, given all the stuff with Pamela and Jason Voorhees, of course, that's where your mind is immediately going to jump to. But in this
Yeah.
case, for good reason. Um,
Yeah. If everybody's just missing, and if there's ever a time where you are calling out people's names multiple times and no one's answering, they either left or they're dead. Like either way, something weird is going on. Because even if your best case scenario is they all just left and
mhm.
they didn't go to the bar that you were at, like then they might have been running from something. That's what I would be thinking.
Or at least be like, oh, being here doesn't seem like a great idea.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so as they're searching, I think at some point the lights go off,
Hmm.
and then he's like trying to find the fuse box. This was probably, hmm, this is not a scary movie, but the closest that I thought was the most effective scene was like not really that much, but when Paul's trying to fuck with the lights and Jenny enters the room
Yeah, I agree.
and she says someone else is here, someone else is here,
Uh-huh.
and then you see in the shadows Jason's just sitting there at the table
Yeah.
like just waiting for them
Scary. Yeah.
and then
And she's
get
as she yells, someone's in this fucking room. Like she like,
yeah,
yeah. I agree. That is the scariest part of this movie. And maybe one of the scarier like scenes in this franchise, really.
yeah, probably. I mean,
Yeah. Because he doesn't usually chill like that.
yeah, like
He's a charge. He's a charger. Like he's always going for it, not like he's not waiting.
this movie also does establish his preference for window entrances.
Yes.
He does love crashing through windows, and that's something that
Yeah.
happens a lot in these
Yeah.
movies.
I mean,
But
hey, if you're wearing a mask all the time, just fucking go for it. Why not?
Paul is the luckiest fuck in this entire series to, I mean, I don't know if he lives in the end. I think the idea is that he doesn't.
Yeah, I'm not sure that even that anyone lives
Maybe, or maybe
except for
what
Muffin.
you think even Jenny? Because I mean, Jenny is like pulled out into the ambulance. Who
Oh
knows?
yeah, she's still around. I mean, yeah, okay.
We'll
Yeah,
get there
Jenny's
though.
good. Yeah, we'll get
Um,
there.
But yeah, no, I just thought that was like a super effective scene, and just you didn't need him to be like, doing the whole uh hockey mask thing. And I don't know, it's just some dude just sitting there with a bag over his head, just sitting
Mm-mm.
in the corner in the dark and just
No,
waiting for
thank
you.
you.
Like, oh my God, I thought that was really good.
Yeah.
But like I said, Paul's the luckiest fuck because he has had multiple encounters with Jason and somehow survives all of them, which
Yeah.
I'm like, first of all, the chances of you, if you're engaged in hand-to-hand combat with Jason Voorhees,
You're probably gonna die.
oh, your chances of survival are like point zero zero
Yeah.
0.001. And
Yeah.
the fact that this dude like has like at least two encounters where he survives here and then later on in the shed, I'm like,
Hmm.
Jesus, dude, you are the luckiest fuck. And I don't
Well, I
know
think
if you deserve it, but
he doesn't. I think they were still trying to establish or weren't really sure how strong they wanted to make Jason or how lethal, So it's like, is there a chance of survival with him or, is it a guaranteed death? So I think they weren't sure yet.
she doesn't know if she, at this point, she doesn't know if Paul survived this encounter because she's like, Paul, Paul, Paul. And then Jason gets up and starts going after
Hmm.
her. She runs into the bathroom. He does a bit of a shining thing, but with a pitchfork.
Hmm.
Um, I love, see, this version of Jason. I like the pitchfork as his
Yeah.
kind of weapon. It's very cool aesthetically, maybe not
Yeah.
practically, you
Yeah,
know?
he feels very rural with the plaid shirt and the bag over his head and the pitchfork.
Yeah. Especially in like I think it's the next movie where it's like he's just like in a barn the whole movie. So
Yeah,
that's a weird one. We'll get there.
we'll
That's
get
not until
there.
December. So
Yeah.
she I think is able to get out of the bathroom, makes her way to the kitchen. This is where she tries to arm herself. She finds normal ass but kind of pervy Ralph in the pantry, which is not the first time a dead body falls out of a pantry in these movies too. So
No,
you set up a lot of
not the
tropes in
last.
this one. It
Yeah.
really sets that foundation
Yeah,
of
yeah.
you've seen this one, you're gonna see at least improved versions of this and some
Yes.
worse versions of this going
Yeah.
forward. So,
A variety.
I think so. Um, she's able to get through the kitchen window, um, makes her way to her piece of shit car. Of course, that doesn't start.
What a shocker.
What a shocker. I wouldn't have even bothered. I've been like, let me try to find the keys to another car, knowing that mine's not
Yeah.
going to fucking work.
Yeah. And
Because,
it's the loudest car. So if he didn't know where you were, he'd hear the engine turning over and be like, oh, she's in that shitty little Beetle.
she tries to get out of that car, tries to run to the other car, can't get in there, and then just beelines it out to the woods. I think
Hmm.
before circling back to the
Hmm.
cabins. And this is where I get a little mixed up, like which cabin she's in, which one she isn't. I do
Well, I
think
think at that point when she's like going through the woods, then is she now at Camp Crystal Lake, like in those cabins?
no, I thought she was, but later when she gets to this next cabin and she's hiding under the bed,
Hmm.
um, and then with the rats and stuff, it
Mm,
reminded me a
yeah.
little bit of
Chopping mall.
yeah, Chopping Mall. Was it rats in Chopping Mall too?
Yeah.
Okay, or they were in the pet store,
No,
right?
it
She
was
was in the pet store.
spiders. It was
Spiders,
tarantulas because she was in the
right?
pet store.
Yeah, and I also sympathized with her because
Yeah.
she's clearly pissing herself under this bed.
Hmm.
And I'm like,
So sad,
yeah, very sad. And I'm just like,
but
but
very real.
hey, probably very real. I can't know what my body's gonna do under that sort of
Hmm.
duress. So I don't blame her. And I realized that she was back at the original cabins, not at Crystal Lake, because then she goes and grabs that chainsaw that they used at the beginning.
Oh, yes. Okay. See, I thought because of the presence of the rats that it was
Right.
an abandoned cabin, but
Me
I guess
too.
if you'd been there for less than a day and, no one's been there all year, probably would be rats.
It's funny that Jason, like the aesthetic of Jason, he's often associated with wielding a chainsaw.
I think it's
Yet,
because of this, because of her grabbing the chainsaw.
Right. But,
which is funny.
and I think exacerbated more or reinforced by, your town haunted houses that pop up each
Hmm.
Halloween. There's always some fucker with overalls and
Yeah.
a chainsaw coming after you
Yeah.
in one of those things. But I just thought that was really interesting because Jason himself, if I'm correct, never wields a chainsaw himself.
I don't think he does. Is that okay? This might be a stupid question. I might not be understanding what this is, but I'm going to go for it. Is that the Mandela effect? Do you know what I'm
Maybe.
talking about? Like that people just assume that Jason like always had a chainsaw, but he never actually did.
Right.
Like they remember it being true. I even did for a little while.
Definitely. I'm trying to think off the top of my head what are some other like good examples in horror. I know there's a couple, but yeah, like I think so, like very much so.
Hmm.
That the way that just kind of the way we've just interpreted. And of course, hey,
Yeah.
we didn't remember right because VHS wasn't widely available. So we didn't get to
Yeah.
rewatch this
Just
movie,
making
but
shit up.
it's like, oh yeah, I think he had the chainsaw. Fuck, that's scary. And
Yeah.
don't get me wrong, if Jason knew how to work a chainsaw, uh, they'd
Well,
be fucked.
yeah.
Whole thing.
Yeah. He doesn't, I mean, we've seen he doesn't even need the power of a chainsaw. So imagine all that.
And she has this chainsaw. She has him cornered. And even like in this, again, this is like the one time I've seen Jason, like he puts his hands up and he like falls back because
Yeah.
he's frightened,
Like, fuck.
you
Yeah.
know. He's worried for his safety. I've never seen
Hmm.
that.
Yeah.
Nor do you ever see that
Yeah.
really
You won't
again.
ever see it again. Yeah.
And she just leaves it and runs. And you're just like,
I,
you take that chainsaw and you go right into his chest and just start just going.
Jenny, like,
Jenny.
you can't even feel sorry for him or be like, oh, we'll let the cops take care of him. He killed everybody. He killed everyone that you know at this camp.
Yeah.
Fucking slice and dice his head off with that chainsaw so that you at least know you are 100% safe because she doesn't know he's going to come back as a zombie someday.
No.
So, there's that. And that's the only point where I don't think Jenny is particularly smart. I do feel like she's smarter than Alice, but Alice was scrappy. Like the way she was fighting Mrs. Voorhees, like she was giving her a fight.
Yeah.
But the thing that they both have in common that I don't like that bothers me about this movie, the same as the first one, is that your final girl is the final girl by default of just being somewhere else or doing something else and not even knowing that anything was happening until the last minute.
Yeah. Whereas, well, I guess a little bit with Laurie Strode in the first one,
Mm-hmm.
but definitely less agency than say like Nancy or Sydney,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. For sure.
definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and again, just like how the first 6 minutes of this movie were a retread of the first one, this old chase scene just is just, you're just running from cabin to cabin
Mm-hmm.
through windows, and it's just very much like not the actual first movie, but again, a retread of the first movie in
Mm-hmm.
a lot of ways. And just like you said, I mean, I think just when you have a final girl that's really just a product of just luck and circumstance,
Yeah.
um, it underscores that a little bit, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Yeah.
So I hear you because yeah, she just kind of pops from, cabin to cabin. Um,
There is a point though where he's like standing on top of the chair when she's hiding and he
mhm,
like pops down. I was like, that also doesn't feel very like future Jason. Like this version of Jason is all over the place. That's why I like to
yeah.
believe that he's alive in this one. And then she kills him, and he then once he's zombified, you get this different version of Jason and the way that he operates.
So she abandons this chainsaw, leaves him there, runs off into the woods, and then ultimately she finds the shed
Mhm.
and also finds the shrine.
Mhm.
Jason's followed her there. She's tried to barricade the door. Won't last for too much longer.
Mhm.
Um, but she's like, clearly this person is deranged, and I'm a budding child psychologist. Um, Let me fuck with this guy's head for a little bit and wear his mother's clothes, pretend to be his mother.
I know, I like her psychological trickery that she pulls on him.
Might as well. Fuck, if that's the only thing you got left, like, hey, that's
Yeah,
a
you're
good
backed in a
smart.
corner.
Yeah. Um, Nobody puts Ginny in a corner. So she's like, I'm gonna put on this sweater, and she's like, Jason, once he comes in. And it works. It's pretty,
Yeah.
and
No,
you've
she
got
was doing a good job. Like the things she was saying too.
and then you've got the superimposed like
Hmm.
images of Betsy Palmer.
Yeah, which
Um,
is great.
Very cool to have her back doing that.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, like, oh, she gets so close because it's just like,
So fucking
kneel,
close.
Jason, kneel down. And she's
Yeah.
ready to, she's gonna fucking take his head off too.
Yeah.
But then Jason sees the head and is like, wait,
Mhm.
hold on.
Whoa,
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 whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa,
whoa.
whoa. You're not mother. No, 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 no. Mother's that head on that stump over there.
Yeah,
But
that's my
man,
beautiful mother.
but then I'd be like, maybe I'd just be happy with this mother that talks, you
Yeah,
know?
I'd be like, let's keep her.
Yeah, 100%. So it doesn't work. He gets up and well, he blocks her trying to swing the machete at him. So
Hmm.
she drops the machete, he tries to attack her, but then this is when Paul, who is still alive, sort of comes to the rescue,
Miraculously.
you know, and still has the fucking audacity to try and take Jason in like a hand-to-hand combat.
Yeah.
And at least, again, does it unscathed and is
Yeah, he
able
does
to,
pretty well.
yeah,
Good for
fucking
Paul.
distract him long enough
Hmm.
for Jenny to go sort through the dead bodies, find that machete again, come
Hmm.
over, and then bam,
Yeah,
right
that
through his shoulder, which I don't think would kill a normal person, let alone
no.
Jason Voorhees.
And I'll give her points for being smart enough to look through the dead bodies and hope that there's a weapon still in one of them. Um, but yeah, the shoulder hit, like,
Come
come
on.
on. This is your second chance to just kill him easily and you're not taking it. Like, you've got a machete. We're gonna cut that head clean off or hand it to Paul so he can if you don't feel like you can do it. Like, come on.
I don't even know why they'd even be surprised if they went back to, was they head back to the
No.
main cabins again. And they're
Yeah,
like,
they're
yeah,
shocked that there's a sound outside. What?
yeah. So they managed to escape. Now Jenny does get a pretty nasty cut on her leg. She looks pretty good, goes pretty deep. Um, they're able to make it back. She stumbles. Paul's like, I'll carry you. I'm a man. I got you. And they make it back to the cabins, trying to tend to her wounds. You
Mm-hmm.
do get a noise at the door. Everyone's ready. And then bam, opens the door. And guess what?
Oh, it's
It's
Muffin. And the
Muffin.
the music cue that plays
Yeah.
too.
Hey, Muffin's alive. Here we
Yeah.
go. Where the fuck have you been, Muffin?
Yeah, what adventures were you on?
And how are you
Where's
dry?
Muffin's
It's been
story?
pouring rain outside. Where have you been?
And immaculate, like so clean.
So with the cute little bow.
Yeah.
Yeah, in his head. Oh, hell yeah,
No
Muffin.
no trauma for Muffin.
I like to believe, even though you don't see Muffin when Ginny comes to, I would hope that Muffin survived.
Yeah,
So
hopefully she kept Muffin.
everyone's feeling okay. Everyone's feeling calm. Everyone's like, oh, all right. We've
Hmm.
survived. We made it. And then, uh-oh, just kidding. Jason pops through the window behind Ginny. You knew that was going to happen the entire time. I'm like, keep your back away from windows.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't know where
Well,
your windows are. And yeah,
she's so focused on that door that she's even like leaning back
yeah,
at the window. But like I wouldn't have been surprised if Jason just came through the window right in that moment before they even discovered Muffin.
right.
Yeah.
100%. So this is where it gets a little hazy because ultimately this is the end of our movie,
Hmm.
um, where it cuts to the next morning. The ambulance and the police are all there.
And Paul is
Ginny,
dead.
is Paul dead?
That's what I'm not sure of.
Because you don't see it. she calls out Paul's name when she's in the
Yeah.
stretcher being put into the ambulance, but you don't see him. So you have no idea what happened to Paul or to Muffin.
If she's
So,
calling out Paul's name, I feel like Paul might be dead.
and then, but she was just what, knocked unconscious and just kind of left there?
Perhaps.
I guess so.
Yeah.
So she's calling out for Paul, being put into the ambulance, then drives away. And then in the
Hmm.
meantime, you cut back to your final shot, which is at the shrine in the shed
Hmm.
on that close up of Mrs. Voorhees' head, which I think one of the original endings, the head was supposed to turn to you and wink,
Yeah.
which
I thought I remember her eyes opening.
I would have, as dumb as it would have been, I'd be like, yeah, that'd be fun.
It's fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
who cares?
Yeah, because maybe you're seeing it from Jason's perspective of her still being animate.
Right.
Yeah.
But
What do you think of Jason's appearance without his bag mask? Like the hair
right,
and the
yeah, and the beard,
eyebrows. Like he's got full on, I don't know, he's like he's a real person.
and looks like an adult version of
Yeah.
the kid that popped out of that lake.
Yeah.
And
Not to mention like a man in his 30s, like adult version, not even like a young man. Like he
right,
looks like
right.
a full-blown fucking middle-aged, not okay, middle-aged. I think of people in their 30s as middle-aged,
Mhm.
but like he's lived some lives.
Right. Yeah, I mean, no, I'm good. I'm glad they kind of did away with that.
Yeah.
Who needs it? Like, I mean, technically, is that, or, would that be probably a little more like realistic what he would look like? Yeah. But
Yeah.
I like the weird kind of like just stray hairs he's got in like the later
Yeah.
ones where,
I like
you
that
know,
the leather of the mask like kind of imprints into his head.
yeah.
Like, yeah, in the later ones, that's kind of fun.
So
Yeah.
that's the end of our movie.
Yeah.
Love to hear some taglines.
Okay, so depending on whether or not you consider deluxe edition DVD covers as an extra tagline,
Mm,
that will I feel like that shouldn't count
yeah. I
because it
think
wasn't like on a movie poster and at the time of release.
mm, for some reason I can't remember the example, but for some reason I thought you'd included some of the later ones, like really re-releases before.
Only
But
for the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
that was it.
There were a lot of really good ones for that one.
That was it.
But I'll include this one just because I already talked about it. So there's
Yeah.
five.
Okay.
So the deluxe edition DVD set says two times the fear, two times the carnage, two times the terror.
I don't think that math adds up, but
No,
mm, sure.
it does not. This one, complicating things further, 1 year ago today, 12 of her friends were violently murdered. Why should the first anniversary be any different?
No.
Yeah, is it the first anniversary or is it 5 years later?
That's like further fucking up this
It's
continuity.
it's further fucking things up.
Yeah.
So,
No, thank you.
oh,
No need to make this
yeah,
more complicated for me. Next.
exactly. Okay. The body count continues.
That's probably the best one.
Yeah, I think so too.
Okay.
I like this one too. Just when you thought it was safe to go back to camp.
Actually, that's the best one
That's a good one.
so far,
Yeah.
at least.
And then the day you can count on for terror is not over. None of that one really makes sense grammatically,
I
but
mean, I think the day you can count on for terror is back or something, or like has, I don't know.
I think they could have just said the day you can count on for terror, Friday the 13th.
I agree, actually.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
the day you can count on for terror. But yeah, I think just when you thought it was safe to go back to camp is the best one.
you definitely.
Yeah.
So Boo scores. Would you like me to go first?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you remember our boost scores for the first one?
Ooh, can you remind me?
Yeah. I believe we both gave this a 3. I'm
Okay.
sorry, the first movie a 3.
Okay.
So I don't know if that will change your score now.
I don't think so. This movie is not as good as the first one.
Hmm.
Um, I don't think the kills are as cool, and I don't think that this version of Jason is compelling as Mrs. Voorhees was in the first one.
Hmm.
And I think I still like Alice a little more than Ginny, but yeah, this movie again, and for being just kind of a retread of the first one, it's still, I think, enjoyable, but this one I feel like I forget the most because it just feels like, I mean, they're all kind of retreads of the first one, but like you said, it's like I think that it's what you do with that foundation,
Hmm.
how do you make it
Hmm.
a little more interesting, whether it's um a creepy little kid who makes masks or a
Hmm.
psychic girl with psychic powers that are undefined or I don't know, anything that happens in Jason Lives. We're going to
Yeah.
Manhattan. I don't know.
They fell back on the fact that Jason wasn't in the first one and they were like, "Oh, we can essentially do the same movie again, but just have it be Jason." I think
Right.
that's where the creativity is lacking because, that's the excitement.
And outside of that one scene I was talking about, like I don't find Jason any scarier or anything than Mrs. Voorhees was.
Mm-mm.
Especially when you found out that like, yeah, she was, fucking crazy and she was the fucking killer.
Oh, yeah.
Um, but again, I mean, I think this movie is watchable. It's nowhere near the low points of this series.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna kind of hedge my bets and say this is a very strong, very watchable two Boo movie.
Okay.
Yeah, what do you think?
So I originally went into watching this movie thinking that I liked it just as much as the first one because it had been a while since I'd seen it. But then when I started watching it, I was like, oh, I've actually seen part two quite a bit more than I thought I had. And yet there's so much of it that's forgettable. And so that, like, I really only remember Jason and his specific characteristics because, when you're thinking about movie to movie, how his character changes and evolves like as a non-speaking character too. That's interesting.
Yeah.
But he's really the only thing that stands out to me. I do like Jenny better than Alice because I will just never forget how Alice got stressed and took a nap. And I'm like, girl,
You know me, I love
you
naps,
would
so
you would
I
have done the
relate.
same thing. Kyle would have done the same fucking thing
Yeah.
and just been alive by default because Jason would have been like, "Oh shit, that guy's been napping in that cabin for hours."
I'm a
I
quiet
just
sleeper too, so you have no
he
idea.
didn't even know.
Yeah.
So, considering I gave the first a 3, I'm gonna give this one a 2.5 because I'm gonna save my two boos for some of the others that I think are definitely worse. Um, Knowing that I probably, oh gosh, I don't know if I would give any of them one boo. So I'm going to give it 2.5.
I think that there are some one Boo movies in this franchise, at least one. Um,
Mm.
cough, Jason Goes to Hell, cough. But
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
don't worry, you'll forget
We'll
that by the
get
time we
there.
get there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
You won't even know.
so yeah, no, I hear you. Yeah, super respectable.
Mhm.
My original score, I was like struggling between anywhere like a two or a two and a half.
Mhm.
But I think ultimately it's weird because I'm like also like trying to kind of like organize in my head like what are my boost scores for all these other movies? Because there's a lot, but
I
I don't
I don't
know.
think that that's fair.
I agree.
For a franchise like this that has so many entries and is like a powerhouse and like a staple of horror, I think it just kind of needs to be graded upon itself. like instead of looking at and comparing other films and franchises to it. So that's how I've been doing my boost scores for it.
Yeah.
And I will say I liked both of these movies more watching them and taking notes to talk about them than I had in a long time, because I think for you get kind of numb to it when you've watched it so many times and it becomes a comfort movie and you just put
Yeah.
it on the background. So I think watching it uninterrupted, not looking at my phone, not getting up without pausing makes them more enjoyable. So I would challenge people if they've seen these movies a lot to try to do that, because it enhances the watch for sure.
Definitely. Dang, that's all I got to say on Friday the 13th part two. Anything else you have?
No, that's all I got.
Oh yeah. Well, dang y'all. As we promised, we'll see you in October. Just couldn't get a Friday the 13th past us. You know, one thing I would probably recommend to make the most out of your one episode this month is, I've been reading a lot about how people will listen to podcasts on higher speeds, like 1.5 speed.
I don't like that. I don't endorse this.
I don't like it either. So I'm going to go the opposite. You only got one episode from us this month. So I would recommend listening to it at a quarter speed. I
That
was,
sounds terrible. Oh my
I,
gosh. Would
I
it
was
affect our voices?
maybe I was originally thinking like, what if I just talked very, very slowly and said, and was like, hey y'all, here's a 4-hour episode of Friday the 13th part two. You're welcome.
Just
Um,
losing listeners by the minute.
but I'm like, let them do the work. Let them slow it down. I don't need to be doing that. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Savor every moment.
So pro tip from your favorite podcast hosts. But that's all I got. All right. Happy Friday the 13th, everybody. To, you know, a blessed one to you and yours. Um,
Don't go
just
camping.
don't go camping. Just
Don't go
don't.
camping. Not in a cabin, not in a tent. I wouldn't even walk a trail. Don't walk a trail.
Don't do it. I was supposed to go camping this weekend and yep, it got rained out. Hell yeah.
Love
So I get to avoid any murderers in the woods.
that
So it
for
all
you.
works out. Thank you. I love that from me too. All right, everybody, take care. We'll see you in October. Three, two, one, ghost.
Thanks for listening to our episode on Friday the 13th, Part 2. If you've been enjoying our podcast, subscribe and leave us a killer review on whichever platform you choose to listen. You can find us on Instagram at 321GhostPod and give us a follow. We're very active on Instagram and would love to hear from you. You can shoot an email to 321ghostpod@gmail.com to share any thoughts, questions, or recommend a movie you'd like to hear us chat about. This will be our only episode for the month of September, but we'll be back in October kicking off our second franchise series. But we're not sharing which one just yet. Thanks again for listening, and maybe just don't camp. Happy Friday the 13th. 3, 2, 1, ghost.